What's up out there, everybody? I'm continuing my journey of the top 100 action movies from the 1990s. If you missed the first video in this series, I'll have it linked for you guys to check out later. This is episode 2, covering movies number 90 through 81. There's a little bit of it all in this list, from cyber thrillers to sci-fi to comics, with maybe an assassin tale or two. So let's get into it. Coming in at number 90 is a modestly forgotten computer thriller that I think still holds up well, from 1995, starring Sandra Bullock as a computer programmer that realizes escape is impossible when you're caught in the net, directed by Irwin Winkler. Now, I'll admit this movie is more of a pure thriller than a traditional action flick, but I enjoy it, and I think the action does hit nicely, and it's a suspenseful ride. It's fun to go back and look at what was considered cutting-edge technology, yet despite all the aging of the tech, the ability to have your identity erased or stolen is even more prevalent today than it was back in the mid-90s. The plot does keep a nice, consistent pace. It doesn't muddle itself with unneeded story layers, and it keeps the focus on Bullock, who delivers a fantastic performance. She brings all the emotional range. She feels like a normal person, and she really brings life to this role, and she lands all the action effectively as well. I think Dennis Miller is a lovable supporting character, and really the main weakness for me in the net is, I'd say, the performance from Jeremy Northam, who just doesn't work for me as the villain. Otherwise, this is an enjoyable cyber thriller from the mid-90s. Sticking with that theme of forgotten gems, for my number 89 movie, it's a moody crime drama with a lot of action to it. It would star Harrison Ford as a man bound by duty. It would also star Brad Pitt as a man trapped by destiny, and both would discover what they're willing to fight for in 1997's The Devil's Own, directed by Alan J. Pakula. Now, I always enjoy movies that showcase two actors from different generations that are able to just go toe-to-toe with one another, and that's what I think The Devil's Own provides with both Harrison Ford and Brad Pitt. The story here does have its pacing issues, and while it is a serviceable plot, it's not necessarily an overly captivating one. I think this limits the films in terms of being an intriguing thriller. However, with the awesome performances from Pitt and Ford, the spots of suspense, and the gritty sequences of gunplay and violence, that The Devil's Own is a capable action flick with a little bit more meat on its bones than the genre usually provided from that era. I think the Boston settings gives the film an appealing backdrop, and overall the atmosphere in this movie is a strong positive. This may not be a film that will resonate with you long term, but when you sit down for it, what it does provide will grab and hold on to your attention. Now, my number 88 pick is certainly much more well-known. It's based on the comic book characters that became famous for their cartoon series. They're 4 mutant turtles that are also teenage ninjas that are heroes in a half shell, and the film would be their first live-action feature, 1990's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This film could be a surprising pick to many of you guys, but I think when you break it down, this is an entertaining action adventure with surprisingly advanced fight choreography. This is still the best big screen live-action version of the Ninja Turtles we've ever gotten, and I think it's because of its effective balance of elements. The costumes still look cool, the comical banter between the brothers cements their bond nicely, and the story, despite its by-the-numbers plot, has a quick, engaging pace to it. And I know it sounds cliche, but what I really love about this movie is how it brings the cartoon that I grew up watching to life on the big screen. This movie feels lived in, it's just gritty enough, and despite the passing of the years, the fight sequences in this one still hold up, and it's always a great time to go back and see the Ninja Turtles kicking ass. Next up at number 87 is a solid indie film from a rookie director that never really gained the same popularity of its big Hollywood sequel. The film would star Carlos Gallegos as a mariachi with a guitar in his hand and a price on his head. He wasn't looking for trouble, but it came looking for him in 1992's El Mariachi, directed by Robert Rodriguez. I'd consider El Mariachi to be about as raw as filmmaking can get. It was crafted on less than $8 grand, and it gives the movie such a strong realism realism that I think makes it feel like you're living in this story with these characters. Now, I will admit the story is a bit thin, the plot layering is limited as well, but Rodriguez's direction and the brutal violence compensate for it nicely. The culture is really steeped into this film. The lack of studio polish is really a strong bonus. The performances admittedly are hit and miss. The pacing is a bit uneven, and it's certainly not as widely popular as its well-known sequel Desperado, starring Antonio Banderas, but El Mariachi is indie filmmaking at its finest, and the vibe of this movie can just capture your imagination as a man with a guitar case full of weapons flees a group of hitmen throughout the back streets of Mexico. Moving along to my number 86 movie, I have a sci-fi thriller that has gained a cult following over the years, but it's one that's still underappreciated. It's directed by Martin Campbell. It stars Ray Liotta and Ernie Hudson as prisoners in a futuristic prison where there is no walls, there is no guards, and there is no escape, from 1994. I would consider No Escape to be one of the more hidden gems on this list. It's a sound film on many levels, yet it's never gotten a proper release on Blu-ray, and it's rarely on streaming services. However, I think it's a great action thriller with a very immersive dystopian setting, enjoyable layers of suspense, and gritty performances. Liotta, more a dramatic actor, is able to feel like an action lead here, and he's more than capable in the action department. Now, the depiction of 2022 was a little bit off, but this movie's apocalyptic setting is just a perfect playground for all the thrilling action and the inspiring world building. Stuart Wilson brings a ton of just charming gravitas to his role. Lance Henriksen and Ernie Hudson deliver strong performances as well, and the production design is, I think, nicely detailed to make this just a very an action film you can really escape into that has more substance than you're usually given during these types of films. Now, my number 85 pick is also another one of those forgotten gems I would consider from the late 90s. It's a ridiculously silly action comedy set inside the world of a socially anxious hitman with a bad stomach, played by Mark Wahlberg, and the movie is The Big Hit from 1998, also starring Lou Diamond Phillips and Christina Applegate. To be honest, I just love this movie for its over-the-top absurdity. Wahlberg is the star, he has his moments of humor, and he's certainly able to deliver all the stunt work needed to make all the dazzling choreography in this film look cool, but really the true star of this film is Lou Diamond Phillips as the villain, who just steals the show with a hilariously excessive performance. The Big Hit is like a parody of the assassin genre without being a parody of the assassin genre, and the alternate reality created in this movie is just a humorous guilty pleasure escape. It's super cheesy in places, but it has a short runtime and a tight, consistent pace to it. The ensemble cast is very strong as well, and when this movie is leaning into the full throttle action, which is frequently, The Big Hit is just a wildly delightful ride of nonsense and hyper-violent killing with a contagiously lighthearted charisma to it. We're going to stick with that Hitman theme for my number 84 pick, but this movie is a little bit more serious. It's also a hit woman flick starring Bridget Fonda as a woman who was given a choice by the government, death or life as an assassin, and there's no turning back because she has reached the point of no return, from 1993, directed by John Badham. This remake of La Femme Nikita is not quite to the level of its original, but I think Bridget Fonda just kicks ass in this movie. She brings more than enough screen presence to pull off the wide range of layers needed for this role. She feels vulnerable and timid at times, but in complete control and relentless during other moments, and her performance is what makes this movie a thrilling ride of intrigue and manipulation and killing. The pace is pretty swift, the story layers are continually moving, and the action is adrenaline pumping with a strong supporting cast led by Gabriel Byrne. I think everybody is able to really elevate their roles, and Point of No Return doesn't really get the attention it deserves. Sure, it was another American remake that maybe came out a bit too soon, but the energy from Fonda's performance is more than enough to validate its existence as one of the best action flicks from the decade, in my opinion. I have another of what I would consider to be a modestly forgotten action flick for my number 83 pick. It's an action thriller that thrives in the shadows from director Sam Raimi. In the darkest hour, there's a light that shines on every human being, all but one, Darkman from 1990, starring Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand. Darkman is Frankenstein meets Phantom of the Opera meets vigilante superhero, and the result is a thrilling adventure with a strong emotional core that has a surprising amount of sincerity to it. I think Raimi's direction is fantastic. He stages the large action set pieces skillfully, and he also brings an intimacy to the quiet moments of the story that gives the movie more emotional grittiness than you would expect. And then you have to really commend the performance from Liam Neeson as Darkman. He's really just shrouded in gauze and gnarly skin, but Neeson is still able to bring heart to this man that connects to the viewer, to have you rooting for his success. And I think the ambition this film shows in the action department results in sequences that are still very much visually appealing all these years later. Some of the digital effects do look a tad dated, but for the time, this movie looked great, and it still looks good enough all these years later to make it a fun, enjoyable, nostalgic ride. The Cop Who Won't Ever Stop is back for my number 82 pick, but this time Tommy Lee Jones is chasing down a lot more than just a fugitive when he plays cat and mouse with Wesley Snipes in the modestly forgotten action gem U.S. Marshals from 1998. I think from top to bottom, U.S. Marshals is a well-crafted action thriller that's skillfully acted and filled with enough action to really elevate the energy when needed, and I think had it not been a sequel to the massively successful The Fugitive, that this movie would have been much more remembered. The plot does get a bit convoluted in the back half, but it's more than enough to capture your imagination and have you guessing. There's spots of suspense, moments of drama, a little bit of mystery, sprinkles of prickly humor from Jones, and the characters are all appealing. Jones's personality is definitely much more robust in this one, but I think it works, and Snipes is awesome as well. He's really able to bring the physicality of an action star to this film, but he also has the acting chops to go pair to pair with Jones, and I think it makes this hunt for an escaped fugitive a very engaging ride. The action stays grounded for the most part. It fits nicely into the fabric of the story, and the massive plane crash in this film is still a wild watch all these years later. And for my number 81 pick, I have a fun, waterlogged action thriller starring Christian Slater as an armored truck driver who must stand between a group of criminals and $3 million during the worst storm in living memory in 1998's Hard Rain, also starring Morgan Freeman, Minnie Driver, and Randy Quaid. Now, the plot of Hard Rain is admittedly generic. It's a simple heist flick with all the usual trimmings, but the rain and flooding are a great added element and far from just a gimmick. The rising waters create a charming element of tension during many moments, and the action is mindless fun with plenty of gunplay and chase sequences like racing jet skis through a flooded high school. It's just a good time. I think the cast elevates the material. They're all going in on these performances. Slater is a solid lead, Minnie Driver is a strong addition, and both Morgan Freeman and Randy Quaid give Hard Rain two very efficient villains. It's also kind of fun to see Freeman play against type, and Quaid is just perfect as the sleazy sheriff. The film also keeps a tight pace. It doesn't wear out its welcome. I think the story is able to connect the weather-themed action together nicely, and the atmosphere of this movie overall just make the movie just mindless fun overall. And that's it for today, guys. That wraps up this cluster of 10 films, numbers 81 through 90, all solid titles. If you haven't seen them, don't forget to check out my first episode in the series if you've missed it, and be on the lookout for the next episode coming very soon, talking about movies number 80 through 71. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I appreciate every one of you. I will see you all in my next video, and until then, movies never say die.
This is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?